Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
that looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
For something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. In last week's edition of Challenge 2.0, we introduced you to a book in the spirit of right and respectful relations. And the gentleman, the historian, that ended up collating conversations that took place over a period of about 5 days up on Orcas Island. There is incredible wisdom here. It's my privilege again, and your privilege, to be able to join again in conversation with Kurt Russo. Kurt has a PhD in history and has been working with the Lummi Nation since 1978, I believe, and you're also the co-executive director of Sicila, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Just for the review, or for those that didn't tune in our last conversation, could you give us a quick summary of what led to the publication of this book, the creation of this book?
What led to the publication was a series of preliminary conversations with some of the people whose voices are in this book and some whose voices are not. But it came down to a sense of urgency to sit down, for tribal peoples to sit down amongst themselves and have a conversation of what today, given all things going on, what is it that makes and keeps us human? Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be human? And they don't mean that in an anthropological sense. I mean in a very different sense, in a very basic, common sense. What does it mean to be human? And so that was the lodestar for everything that's in that book, and you see it repeated throughout that question, that perplexing question, which it's one of those questions, where it can be asked more easily than answered. So there are some ways of contemplating that question, but I'm not sure it's a question that they sought to answer. They wanted to take it into consideration from different points of view.
When we talk about being human and there is that sense of loss, that we aren't fully human, and this is helping, as I've read this a couple times now, a sense of helping us recover that. There is reference to white settler culture. Is that sense something that culture, our culture, never had, or is it something we had but lost? What's your feeling on that?
Well, you only ask very small questions. Here, let me. I think there's like 300 or 400 definitions of what does culture mean. Kurt Vonnegut said it's poetry passing as science to talk about it. So when we say settler culture, that's a tough one. But I will say this, that those who can trace their roots to the European experience, I can't speak, I don't want to speak more than just I'm talking about the European experience.
Right.
Whatever that is. Because Europe is the Dutch and the Italians. Okay, then, we have Europeans. The Germans and the Portuguese. They're all Europeans. Okay, so what they do have more or less in common, and I've thought about this, in the root of their being, in the driving spirit of the European enterprise, was Greece, ancient Greece. And I've taken that into consideration, and I've done a lot of reading about ancient Greece. How did they make their world? With what did they make their world? Oh, it's amazing. It's not just a bunch of gods sitting on Olympus. They were not stupid people. They were very smart people. And they had a very sophisticated view of what is real and what is meaning and what is nature. They gave us the idea of nature. And I look at some of their core concepts, and they are absolutely parallel. And it's like they're braided with indigenous concepts. If you go back to ancient Greece, really similar, very similar animistic worldview. And then something happened. Something happened, starting, people vary on this, but, 1400s, 1300s, 1200s. And the whole mindset of the European experience turned away from the divine, and I don't mean the divine, I mean the divine around us. Do you know the diamonds on the water that are caused by sunlight and moonlight? The Greeks had a name for that. It was a goddess. And her name was Thea. And you could talk to her. You could have a dividuated relationship with the light on the water, with the sheen on leaves. There was this relationship. They weren't saints by any means, but they had a sense of the divine that was ubiquitous. And then the Romans changed things a bit. And then the Middle Ages occurred. And then we got all that follows, the Industrial Revolution, so on and so forth, the Age of Discovery. And so that connection we're talking about, it's there. There's no question in my mind. I joke with my friends about animism. See, in 1904, Durkheim, very famous sociologist, said, animism is the way children think of the world. Really, for thousands of years and all over the world. I thought, Jeff, you ever get mad at your lawnmower?
Even kicked it.
See, well, you're an animist.
Yeah.
I mean, and what I've been told is, it's not that silly, Kurt. I mean, everything around you at some point was part of the earth. Everything was somewhere on the planet. And if you go to Greece, that means it all had agency. So there is this, I think when I talk with people from a public facing discussion about what occurs in the relationship to that kind of divine among the indigenous peoples of this part of the world, it is, on the one hand, they go, how can that be true? On the other hand, they ask, how is that true? How is that true? How is that true? That's a good question. Well, why does this happen? Because of that. See that? That's a worldview. That's what that is. Isn't universal? It was pointed out by one person, the idea of the self is neither timeless nor universal. Actually, it's fairly new. Among indigenous peoples that I've worked with, whether it's here or down in South America or wherever, there is something universal in the way that they know how that is true. How that is true. The French, I love the French. The French, it's called perspectivism, you see. That's what it is. You see, that's perspectivism. Like we were talking earlier about how my brother, my dear friend, Lummi Indian Jewel James, was talking about the power of song in the forest. That in the forest, there are songs that live in the forest. And you have a way of gathering that song to yourself and getting its gift. And the woman next to me from Baylor University, very respected linguist, she goes, oh, what marvelous magical realism. She missed it. She missed it.
When we talk about missing it, we talked a little bit about recognizing what we've lost. One term for that can be grief work, but as you pointed out very, very well in our last conversation, we need to take a little different view that will relate to the experience of everybody. I think when we talk about that, of the practice of what's been called America's greatest contribution to religion, and that is Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step process. And that to get anywhere, you need to admit your addiction. What are the addictions that are getting in the way of the humanity as brought up in this book?
Avoidance. We're addicted to avoidance. What the Romans called bread and circuses.
Mm-hmm.
We have our bread and our circuses and our cell phones. Anything to help us avoid. Anything that's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a lot of things right now. So I think we're addicted to tools for avoidance. Now, why? Why when I go to a gym has everyone got a headset on? They're all by themselves, surrounded by themselves. And I think you said earlier, the interiority of their self is not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Their interior self isn't their best friend. Maybe a tormentor. Or it might just be a stranger. I want to mention one thing about that, though. With the Lummies, we have Rocotaman Lacandones of Chiapas, southern Mexico. And they had not yet seen the talking book. The talking book had not arrived.
Mm.
It's an interesting term, talking book. So I read this book by Ivan Illich called The ABC of Literacy. And he points out that when you become literate, you get a voice in your head. Right? You're reading a book, and it wasn't there before. The book, the talking book, puts a voice in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, it was animated by this. This discussion animated the interior self. And that's called dividuation. And in the spirit, in what spirit?
Mm-hmm.
In the spirit of, I'll call it dividuation. So there's Jeff, and there's Kurt, and there's this. This is what's important, not that. This is what needs to be stewarded and caretaken and honored
Mm-hmm.
and fed. And if it isn't, then we have something broken. Because you can't get it. You can't get it alone. I don't know how many great books you have. And I thought that's very interesting. An interior voice. And it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have that much of one either. I'm not arguing as books,
Mm-hmm.
but they do create this illusion, and maybe one of the problems is, of a self that's in there. And maybe that's part of the problem. That we're both creating something that doesn't exist and afraid of something that doesn't exist at the same time. Everywhere I go, Jeff, and I know I sound like a boomer saying this, but young people are looking at their phones. It scares me.
Well, it's interesting when you go to a restaurant, you see two people or more people seated there, not talking, and they're looking at their phones.
Yep. And they're out there watching this, they're going, oh, geezers, they don't know anything. They're just talking like that because that's the way old people talk. No, that's not what's going on.
When we talk about the power of encounter with the world around us, even what we call hard science is underscoring the fact that cultivating that sense of awe and wonder of encounter in nature is really good for us. Beyond that, there's a sense in what might be called the spiritual sense of nature, and in your book, collectively, it talks about something called supernature. Can you explain what that is? And I think you had a really powerful example of something that you encountered with that.
I have another one.
Okay. You've got the floor. Go ahead.
So, at this point in time that we're about to visit, I was in the Lummi Nation's Natural Resource Building.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a window of, a wall of windows facing, it was spring, late spring, and my colleague, Jewel James, had not come in that morning. He was always the first one in. and there's this robin, like the bird, and it's flying against the window, smashing against the window, and leaving blood marks all over the window. I'm going, whoa! So I turned to a friend of mine who's a biologist, and I said, what's going on there? She said, oh, it's probably what she called apparent nest behavior. We're in between in its nest, and it's trying, okay. And I said, So I asked somebody else, another scientist, ornithologist. He said, it's had too many berries to drink, so it's kind of drunk. So then I asked Josie Jones, the Lummi Indian woman who ran the office, Josie, what's going on? She goes, where's Jewel? I said, I don't know. Go to his house now. So I drove to his house just as he had left after a very bad argument with his spouse, and slammed open the door and raced off on his motorcycle in a flurry and a fury. And I said, Josie, what was that? And she goes, oh, the robin. It's the messenger of fire. Okay, that's one. And then there was that journey, again with Jewel. I'm telling you, this man is unique. And he's a carver, master carver. And he carved 18,000 pounds of totem poles. We were delivering to the Pentagon because of 9/11.
Right.
There he stood up on the Pentagon grounds. Big poles. On an 18-wheeler, donated to us for the journey, driven by someone who didn't charge us anything. And we pull into a place called Alpine Village outside San Diego. And this is the central village of the people of the Viejas band of the Kumeyaay Indians who occupy that whole territory. We pull in, the truck parks right in front of a canopy. Under the canopy are a whole group of elders, and behind that, a lot of other people. And I'm watching this. I hear this sound. What's that? It's a jet. There's a jet coming. It's a jet coming at us. It's coming right. Oh, I looked up. Tens of thousands of honeybees are circling out of the sky. Big circle. And I came down to where the chairman of the Viejas was standing, and came down to the pole. And then I looked down to see this Kumeyaay elder, and he did this with his wrist. And they went like that. And the chairman of the Viejas tribe looked at that elder and he said, I wish I knew what you know. I couldn't sleep that night. I mean, I'm in a fugue state. So I'm walking around the village, and there's a Kumeyaay woman in her military gear, guarding the totem poles, a veteran. I go, hello. She goes, I said, were you there today? She goes, of course. I said, what was that? You said you wanted a ceremony. You wanted a blessing. It was a blessing. I said, Lummies, they often have the traditional names. Yeah. Do you have it? She goes, yeah. And can I know? She goes, yeah. And she gave me the name, and I said, what does that mean? She said, honeybee. Now, that happened. That's not just a bedtime story. It was filmed. I don't know why people don't pause and say, how does learning more about how they know help us out of the mess we're in?
There's that sense that we're beginning to see in some quarters called the personhood of nature. We've seen it expressed in Spain and Brazil and New Zealand in particular, where aspects of the biosphere, rivers, waves, and mountains, are being accorded the same sorts of legal rights as human beings. Is that a progression, a natural progression from what you're talking about in the book? And what calling would you issue to people that read the book or watch this program that are in relationship to that?
Okay, you can add one more to the list. The Dugong of Guam. The Dugong of Guam have personhood. Now that's a territory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in American law. A dugong is a sea mammal, which the American military is about to devastate an entire coral reef with a dugong live. So the dugong was granted personhood because of a series of court cases. It's interesting to ask that question because we are now, we being Cecilia, are jointly authoring an article with the Department of Anthropology at MIT on this topic as it relates to southern resident killer whales and the late southern resident killer whale Tokatai. There was about to be a court case filed about Tokatai under the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. No one ever done that before. So we did some research. It turns out that it also protects sentient beings. Who knew? As long as it meets 3 criteria, which she did. So 2 Lummi women had filed a lawsuit under NAGPRA demanding she be returned. Now, if that had succeeded,
If she had survived.
And it has succeeded, that means that Miami Seaquarium would have had to pay all of the costs of a repatriation. Let me mention one thing about that, though. That was a very heartfelt story among Lummies, everyone on Cecilia, including myself. She died. Now, she was murdered. And they wouldn't give out the autopsy. They just gave her remains. And so the remains were flown home on a jet paid for by the owner of the Indianapolis Colts and flown back to Bellingham, where a limousine met her remains and took her to Bellingham Bay, where she was put on a Lummi law enforcement boat and some fishing boats and taken out to sea. And at one point, there was also a funeral going on Lummi Reservation. So the boat paused, and everyone at the funeral came out and raised their hands to her. Relative. And the boat did a counterclockwise circle, as you do with funerals, and went out and put her remains out in the Salem Sea, and the Coast Guard guarded it so no one would know where it was. She was a person. I hope this gets to people that aren't otherwise predisposed to find this kind of thing interesting. So I hope they take interest in some of these suggestions. Wherever you live, there's a non-governmental organization trying to do something about the environment. Volunteer there for 7 years till you know something. 2, be an environmental hero. A 50-mile radius from where you live. Be a hero. 3, maybe you don't really care that much, but if you dig into it, you'll find it very interesting. Who were the indigenous peoples that occupied the land you're on right now? What was their story? I'll guarantee you it's going to be interesting. And the 4th thing I would advise is persevere. Those interventions can matter a lot. I don't mean give money to an NGO. I mean volunteer at one.
Put some skin in the game.
Well, you know, that's an interesting term. A friend of mine once said to me, I really want to donate money to this tribe X to have them buy some land, but they don't have any skin in the game. And I said, my friend, it's all their skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have skin in the game. They're trying to get some of the body back.
Right.
I think that touches on one last thing I think is really important, which is And I'll quote Jay again, and Jay being someone I value as a friend and as a mentor. He will say, and he will say emphatically, Native people don't want pity, empathy, be good. And I think that I would advise people to exercise empathy. It gets to your point about being in relation. It's hard to do without empathy, another kind of empathy. And this was pointed out by one of the conversants in this book. We need to learn what we mean by. We need to learn what we mean by having empathy for nature's empathy for itself. We have to get to that spot.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. This is an incredible book that I have taken so to heart that I've given copies of this to a number of people. I really recommend that people make the effort to get this. And we should also mention that this was a collaborative project with Braided River. And we're going to give an address there because they try to make these issues known through some wonderful books. And then they give people the next stage to do so. So, Kurt, thank you so much for being a part of this program and for opening our viewpoint. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you to each of you for tuning into this episode of Challenge 2.0. We hope you'll join us again next week.